لتابيلر.
all things that matter in your life.
A very good afternoon and a warm welcome to our Wednesday edition of Living Redefined, leading the conversation on 104 to 107. I am with a group of phenomenal ladies today for our panel discussion on reaching gender equality. This will make up part of the broader conversations that we'll be having on the station during the course of the month around Women's Month and what it essentially means. So if you'd like to catch us this afternoon, we're live virtually everywhere. We're live on Twitter, we're live on YouTube, and we are live on Facebook. So Women's Day in South Africa commemorates an important historical event. On the 9th of August, 66 years ago, 20,000 women marched to the union buildings to protest the extension of past laws. During apartheid, these laws were enacted to restrict the movement of particularly black women. So we're talking, what kind of conversations are we having leading up to that, and in keeping with finding solutions to reaching gender equality. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my panelists this afternoon. We are joined by Candice Chirwa, who is an author, gender activist, and thought leader. Candice's activism is better known as the Minister of Menstruation, and one of the pillars that we'll be covering this afternoon is health access. So I'll hand over to you, Candice. A very good afternoon. Talk to us about how you'll be contributing to the conversation.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to the audience tuning in. I think healthcare, access to healthcare, and all the conversations around our bodies during Women's Month is so pivotal because it's often met with so much stigma and shame. And for me, I think what's important to understand is that, the access to this healthcare is also unequal. So having these conversations and allowing people to realize the significance of taking care of themselves during this time of the month is so important.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're also joined by Fasiha Hassan, who's a youth leader in South Africa, elected as the youngest member of the provincial legislature in Gauteng. So, of course, she will extend on the conversation around political empowerment. Fasiha, very good afternoon to you. How are you contributing this afternoon?
Thanks for having Ms. Sechaba and all of our viewers and listeners at home. I think, or I would hope,
Apologies for that. And just to extend on that, we are broadcasting live from the foyer of SABC Radio Park. So if there are sort of interruptions or technical glitches, please bear with us this afternoon. You can take over.
But perhaps that's why it's the more interesting discussion. With live, we can't control everything. It's really organic. It really is what it is. And I think that's wonderful. But yeah, so today, really hoping to put forward a further discussion around policy. We have a country with excellent policies, but terrible implementation. So that's one of the things we really have to cover, but also around gender-sensitive reporting, gender-sensitive budgeting in government, and very importantly, writing policies that center women, center marginalized communities, and we'll get into it. We'll unpack why it's important. But really, it's around the structural issues of what we're trying to do.
All right. Next up on our panel is Nolene Tahane, because, of course, ladies, we cannot have a conversation around bridging the gap when coming to gender equality without talking about the marginalization of women from a financial standpoint. How do we regain our power when we're not making money? So we're going to be speaking to Nolene Tahane, a financial advisor, passionate about financial literacy, facilitating numerous money matters workshops. A big thanks to you, Nolene. How will you be contributing?
Thank you so much for having me, Sechaba, and thank you to the audience for tuning in and listening as well. My contribution today is what really I am passionate about. It's, how important it is that women have financial independence, and also about bridging the gender pay gap and how that contributes to the economy as a whole. So that's my contribution for today.
All right. And of course, finally, Umogolo Daunyane Mguni is the founder and executive director of GBV Monitor South Africa, which is an NPO focusing on research, tracking, and tracing GBV cases and a systemic evaluation of the rural criminal justice system. Of course, we look at our stats, Umogolo, and this one is a painful one, because we cannot talk about gender equality without discussing at length the GBV and femicide crisis that we have here in the country. The rape capital of the world. A woman is killed every 4 hours. Let's talk a little bit about this.
Thank you, Sechaba, for having me, and afternoon to all our viewers and listeners this afternoon. You know, my contribution today is really just to try to elevate our conversation about GBV. And not just GBV as, you know, an event that we only care about in Women's Month and in November and December because it's 16 days campaign, but that GBV is a daily reality. Women and children, queer people are being victimized because of the agenda. And really what I am hoping we can get out of this conversation is to really remove the responsibility of eradicating GBV from women. Men are the perpetrators, and they are the people who we should be targeting, changing mindsets to really see the change that we need in society.
All right, very fitting panel this afternoon. I'm also just excited, you know, to have 4 beautiful co-hosts this afternoon. But of course, extending this to our SAfm family, you're more than welcome to get in touch with us. We won't be taking calls this afternoon, but most certainly taking your voice notes. So the number there, as per usual, is 061-410-4107. You can send us your WhatsApp texts or your voice notes. And if it's going to be a voice note, please be sure to keep it to a maximum of 60 seconds. All right. I want us to go through the pillars, you know, access to quality healthcare. And even though you're all particularly delving into the various pillars and themes, I feel like this is just a conversation amongst women. Let's make it about that. Candice, let's start with you. You know, if we look at our reality when it comes to women accessing quality healthcare, South African girls and women are essentially the periphery of the healthcare system. Why are we still experiencing challenges, and what are these challenges essentially looking like?
Well, when we think of access to healthcare, we also need to look at the quality of access to healthcare that will allow young women and girls to continue to access those services. And often from those experiences, a lot of young girls report not going back to their gynecologist or their general practitioner because they're always turned away, especially with issues around reproductive healthcare. So, you know, when someone says, I have a flu, your doctor can easily take your temperature and believe that you have a flu. But if there's something regarding your period pain or period conditions, that's a bit difficult to believe, right? Because the doctor wouldn't necessarily know how to track those symptoms. And therefore, you know, on top of waiting long hours to get access to a doctor, on top of the issue of access to medication and how expensive it is, there are just so many barriers to entry to receiving access to healthcare. I mean, I think of my first experience when I was visiting a gynecologist, and I was terrified. You know, oftentimes it's a very cold environment, you know, and someone is literally seeing your vagina, right? It is the state of affairs of your reproductive health system, and it can often feel very cold and rigid, and you often just feel the need not to go again. And this is the reality with so many people who don't actually even know, you know, what's normal when it comes to reproductive health care, what's normal when it comes to period pain, what's normal when it comes to, you know, when I should see a doctor, because the access to that information is very difficult. We also need to acknowledge that we live in a 2-tier healthcare system, right? So about 71% of our country relies on public healthcare, whereas 27% relies on private healthcare. And because of the healthcare system being funded through, and the funding is perpetuated by inequality, majority of our people in this country are experiencing really inaccessible healthcare. And this is the conversations we should be having, right? The maternal mortality rate where a woman is pregnant is very high due to the access of that healthcare, due to the services, due to the attitudes that often women experience during these services. So it's really something that I think not only tackles just the resources, but also the attitudes and the stigmas that exist in these institutions.
Fasia, I'll extend to you just to head back into the element of politics, you know, and participation specifically of young women in, you know, the political sphere and arena. South Africa is among one of the top 20 countries with a high presence of women, both ministers and parliamentarians. Why then are we still having the conversation around gender equality when paper says this?
I think that's exactly the point. So many people think that this is a numbers game. That if we have enough women in a particular space, which of course we must still aim to, right? We're not shying away from the fact that we should have more women policymakers, more women lawmakers, more women in the executive, yes. But that doesn't automatically equal gender equality. It doesn't, number one, mean that all of those women are progressive, and that's not an honest conversation enough of us are having.
Love the honesty.
But the second thing also is it goes exactly to what we're saying, that the problem is structural. That we could have a woman president, a woman deputy president, in fact, we could have a four-woman cabinet. We would probably have better service delivery, let's be honest, we probably would. But that's not going to solve the structural crisis, right? Whether that's around healthcare, whether that's around education, whether that's around gender-based violence, whether that's around access to the economy. And that's the big question that we need to have here. So, yes, we've done well in having more than 50% of women in parliament, but how do we translate that onto the ground for women who cannot access those spaces, who cannot speak directly to a decision maker? How do we change Umama and Ugogo's lives so that they, number one, feel safe, they have access to the economy, they have safe healthcare, they can send their kids and themselves to school? So the one thing around that is around having progressive policy, but it's also around forcing implementation. It's also around looking at the structure, and very importantly, I mentioned this now, gender-sensitive budgeting. And if you'll allow me very quickly, what does that mean? We can have excellent policies, and we do. But if we don't put a budget to that policy, it will never be implemented. So it's around saying we have this idea of having courts that deal specifically with sexual violence and sexual assault. But where is the budget for that, number one? Number two, now that you have the budget, how do we hold that particular department accountable in its actual implementation? Only then can we truly say that having women representation in parliament, in the executive, is equaling out the other side. And that's really the point of what we were talking about women tokenism as well, around the fact that we don't have enough meaningful decision-making power.
All right, if you've just tuned in, this is our Women's Month roundtable here at SAfm. We are live on 104 to 107 nationwide. And of course, this forms part of the broader conversation that we'll be having throughout the course of the month pertaining to reaching and acquiring gender equality. You're more than welcome to get in touch with us. We'll be right back with our incredible panel right after this quick break. They must tell them to line up promos.
Check 1 2 1 2. Mic 1. Check levels. Check 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 check. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. Checking checking. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. It's high. Check 1 2 1 2 1 2. So it's high. Check check check. 1 2 3 4. Check 1 2 3 4. Level check. SAfm. Check 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. Checking levels, checking mic 1, check levels. Here's your mic 1, mic 1. Tabok, is it still unplugged? It's plugged, no? It's plugged. Well, they must get what I'm talking. Check 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 4. Check 1 2 mic 1, mic 1. Mic 1. Check, check, check. Mic 1. 1, 2, 3. Check the level, check level. Level check. SAfm. Check.
Okay, let's play another conversation.
I think it's just getting
Kimma.
because you don't know if the new space is ready. Yeah, no, that's
Is that a song?
It's just the way it is.
Is that a song?
I just wish you saw this part.
What's happening?
Mark just played a song. I just said no, guys.
Yeah. They got headsets on or?
Can they hear them live talking like that? No, they're managing the technical glitches.
So we've got a small technical just trying to, because it's sounding low on to the listener. Very low, yeah.
This is so frustrating. But what about headlines?
People might make a mistake.
Jole balwana ga ba mametse.
And they must take a call.
So it's not fixed as yet.
No, it doesn't.
Then let's go upstairs and have it upstairs. Call him, baby, call him. Why is it quiet? Ladies, sorry, hey, we're just having some technical glitch. Yeah, shame just for content.
I hope so. It's like it's a video, ne?
Yes.
Okay.
Kupong kenye le nna.
So you can
Pake lapho.
you talk. Yeah.
Guys,
Let me go.
remember to move upstairs. Okay. Okay, just put what?
Yeah, so ladies, we've got to make this a broader conversation around women's issues, even though we're looking at unpacking it according to the different pillars, wouldn't you say?
I agree. Yeah, we need to make it more conversational, more intimate, to ensure that people really relate and engage. Hasia?
Now, Lady was saying there's so much work for us to do as women supporting women.
Yeah.
And so often we just forget about that. We
Yeah.
think that things are just going to fall into place. It needs to be deliberate.
Yeah.
Yes, no, definitely, I agree. It's all about empowering each other, right? And
Absolutely.
that's where it starts. That's the basic. Yeah.
Should we go now? Upstairs.
Okay, guys, we have to go upstairs now.
See, I'm gonna catch this as content.
And we're leaving the lights, right?
Yes. Moving videos.